All right. Hey, everyone, listeners. Welcome to another episode of the Heartfelt Presence podcast. Today, we're with Rishi, who is a coach on Heartfelt Presence. So, for those who don't know, Heartfelt Presence is an organization that's basically a collection of about 200 volunteers that provide a 24/7 Zoom room that anyone can drop into at any time. You know, if they're feeling down or they just want to explore insights into the nature of the mind and the human experience, and maybe end up feeling a bit more peaceful. That service is available to you, and Rishi is one of the volunteers. So we are just going to have a chat with him today. So, Rishi, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for coming on. If you'd like to introduce anything about yourself, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Thanks for having me here, and uh, I really appreciate the entire Heartfelt Presence initiative. It's very close to my heart. Uh, I've been a professional coach for a few years now, and been in the field of neurolinguistic programming and all of these different approaches and methodologies to coaching. But when I came across Heartfelt Presence as an organization, I knew this was different because of the kind of community that we've created around this understanding of how the human experience works and how the mind works. Uh, it immediately clicked for me. I was in a group call with a few other coaches, and somebody invited me to this organization, and I was like, yeah, sure, this deserves an hour of my time. And I came in, and it was all I could say is I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I'm getting to talk with people from across the world, helping them in whatever way I could.
Mm, wonderful. Yeah. Well, we're grateful to have you. So tell me, how how do you feel? Like you spoke about how you used to be into neurolinguistic programming. And can you describe like how neurolinguistic programming worked and how your understanding maybe changed? Like
Mhm.
what changed for you? What evolved for you?
Uh, um, I came across neurolinguistic programming a little more than a decade ago. Like I was going through some tough time in my own life, and I basically entered into this field because I wanted to help myself. And I studied it, and it made a lot of sense. It helped me in different kinds of ways. But over the years, what I've noticed was there was some missing piece with NLP. Right? It worked. But to me, at a deeper level, it always felt like I was faking it.
Hmm.
Right?
Can we
I,
just
I
hold on? Just pause for 1 second. It just occurred to me that maybe some people don't have never heard of NLP before. So maybe just give sort of like a little bit of
yeah,
context, still,
sure.
but then resume what you were saying because.
So, NLP is basically trying to reprogram your thinking. There are different techniques and methodologies you could use to do that, to basically think more positively or think in a way that's helpful. And it's based on the fact that how we think and how we use our language creates our experience of reality.
Mhm.
And it was very helpful in a lot of ways, but at the same time, it felt that I was kind of faking myself. There was always this missing piece because it worked, but you just didn't get why it worked.
Hmm.
And I was on this constant pursuit of, okay, if I'm making it all up, then what's the point, right? What's the basis on which I'm making stuff up? So that has led me into a deep dive into this whole field of self-help and psychology. I couldn't find any answers there. There was just more and more theories and concepts and definitions. So I
Hmm.
went into philosophy. I went into an inquiry into first principles, Cartesian skepticism, and basically figuring out what's real and what's not real.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of philosophy took me into, it's a complicated subject, to be honest. There's metaphysics and there's epistemology, and like, what is there? How do we know what is there? Now that we know it, what should we do about it? And all of these
Hmm.
questions that seem pretty obvious to a lot of people, but with not so obvious answers. So I ended up in my philosophical inquiry with nihilism. There's no point, there's no meaning, and any meaning we create has no meaning either.
Hmm.
That felt futile. So that was that was where I hit a brick wall with my inquiry. But over the years, as I started looking deeper and deeper, I've noticed that there was that missing piece that philosophy wasn't answering and psychology wasn't even anywhere near, that I found through an introduction into a subtler aspect of how the mind worked.
Mm-hmm.
And it was basically at its core the understanding of our thinking as something that is at some level different from the fact that we are aware of it.
Hmm.
And that shook my entire world when I first heard it. I was listening to my mentor Michael Neal talk about it. He's one of the teachers in this understanding, and uh, the first time, literally the first time, I've heard him speak about thoughts in a way that is different from consciousness. I went silent, and I had to take an entire week off for myself because I couldn't speak to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
It just hit me hard. I saw something that I was in pursuit of for almost a decade.
Mm.
I saw that, capital T truth, that universal truth. Because until then, because I was coming from an NLP background and I was really skeptical and inquiring into the nature of truth, I was like, nothing is true. It's all subjective.
Mm-hmm.
But at that moment, I heard that, yeah, it's all subjective, but that's an objective fact. It's
Mm-hmm.
almost like it's a tautology. It's self-evident. So that really shifted the perspective for me. That put me into the back seat and helped me look at the mind from a very different point of view. I think that helped me evolve as a person. That helped me have later on an enlightenment experience. That helped me change the way I coach people, and it was life changing.
Cool, cool. So, I think, can you maybe expand on 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 that experience and like, I just kind of want to zoom in because you went over it pretty briefly, and I know there's a lot in there. There's a lot of juiciness. Um, so I wonder, like, can you maybe tell us in your own words, as in whatever way you want, what you saw, that like what was it that you saw that changed you so deeply?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. There's a lot to talk about that bit because that's although I glossed over it, there's a lot of depth in that. I saw for the first time probably in my life that I was looking at the whole thing from a very unhelpful place. Or to put more words to it, it was this realization that all the pursuit into psychology, into philosophy, and spirituality for me is nothing other than philosophy. It's philosophy directed to the subjective experience, is what I call spirituality. The objective world, it seems like philosophy. That's all. So I don't like differentiating between spirituality and philosophical inquiry really, but
Right.
it was the seeing that the goal was not to find answers, which was what I was looking for. The goal was to realize that the questions did not make sense.
Hmm.
The questions raised more questions, which raised more questions, which raised more questions, until at a point you realize that, okay, then who's questioning? Right? So if you're noticing something, then who's the one noticing it? And I went into it felt like a regression. There's no end to this, but there was an end. I saw that end, and that end was nothing outside, but that end was me, the subject, not an object of my awareness, but the subject itself.
Hmm. So let me just see. So I have my own idea of what you mean by subject and object. So I'm just going to share that, and then you tell me, yeah, whatever occurs to you, right?
Cool.
So to me, like, the subject of the experience is this sort of like, it's almost like an ineffable, I guess consciousness. It's like that 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 being which is experiencing being you, that could be experiencing being anyone, anything, you know, maybe even a worm or something, but I don't know. But to me, I feel like there's something in me that is experiencing the life of Pete and Pete's thought and Pete's reality. And that being that is inherently formless, inherently kind of simply watching, in a sense, simply experiencing. It's like, it's like, it's almost like as if life is a movie, and like the subject is the one watching the movie, and the movie is basically the thoughts that we're having that are creating this experience. Is that what you mean by like subject and object?
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean by subject and object. And what you said kind of triggered something for me to go deeper and put more words to the experience, because the this is so abstract at some level. It's very difficult to communicate in a way that's clear, right?
Hmm.
Now remember, I was a philosophical person. I was inquiring into the nature of truth and reality. So I was when I heard concepts like these, like subject and the being that's experiencing life through me, I was skeptical. The difference that was made during that awakening was that the shift in identity from, oh, there isn't this being in me that's experiencing the life of Pete. I am that being experiencing these things.
Hmm. Exactly.
So the I shifted from Rishi, the person, the personality, which is the mind, the thoughts, the feelings, the body,
Yeah. Hmm.
to to the consciousness within. And I remember one particular day that I was I was out with my parents, and I was sitting at the outside the high school that I studied in a long time ago. I was in a car, and I was looking at the side view mirror in the car. I was just looking at my face, and I looked at the high school that I studied in, like, I don't know, more than a decade ago. And immediately for me, I was like, what the hell? Is this the same guy who studied in that building? Because he definitely doesn't look the same. And I was like, oh shit, then I'm not the body.
Hmm.
And then I was like, okay, then yeah, of course I'm not the body. I'm in the body. I'm the person in the body. And then I was like, what is the person? It's a combination of memory and imagination, it's a combination of thoughts and feelings
Hmm.
and understandings. It Were they the same more than 10 years ago? No, they weren't even the same yesterday. Oh shit, then I'm not even the mind.
Hmm.
Not even the personality, not even whatever I think I am. Then what am I? Because I already knew that the thought was separate from consciousness, I had insight into that, it was pretty easy for me to pinpoint, oh, I'm completely messed up in how I identify myself. I'm ignorantly identifying myself as this person and this body when I'm actually the consciousness behind.
Mm.
I think that shift in identity was what changed everything for me.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like consciousness is just like the light of experience. And in the same way, like this pen, like it crosses through your experience and you're not the pen. Like it's obvious because, you're going to leave the room and the pen's not going to be there, right? So so you're not the pen. But I think if the pen were to be a very persistent experience, we might actually begin to think that we are the pen. And I feel like that, as silly as that sounds, that's kind of what we do with the personality and our thoughts and, even to some extent the body. It's like, because it's such a consistent experience, we think, oh, this is who I am. Like, I've been having these thoughts for 10 years. It's my personality. But that simple, like the simplicity of just seeing, like, just because you've been thinking something a long time, well, first of all, I mean, that's just a thought too, right? That's just memory. So how do you even know that? But even if, like, um, let's say for example, uh, I, I think this thought often that um, I'm afraid of social interactions. Let's just say, social interactions scare me. I'm socially anxious, and I have socially anxious thoughts, and maybe that happens so often that I actually think that I am those thoughts, and that those thoughts are me. And obviously, in the experience of those thoughts arising through that that space of awareness, of consciousness, you're going to feel that. You're going to feel socially anxious if you're thinking socially anxious thoughts. But that doesn't mean that you are them. Like the space where the thoughts come through, it's like the same as, the space where this pen is right now. And maybe a moment from now, it's not going to be there anymore. And so it really like brings to our attention that our true identity is not with our psychology or personality or the thoughts we think. It's like way before that.
Yeah, you said right. It's beyond psychology. It's before psychology comes in, right? And that was the first step. But then I saw I felt that was the deepest it could go. Then I realized there was one more step to be taken, and that step was to realize that uh, the object that is appearing in my awareness is nothing different from the awareness itself solidifying. So it was this realization that I, the consciousness alone, am actually appearing as thoughts and feelings and bodies and everything else. So it's the first step was like, oh, I'm not this, I'm not that. But then I was like, oh, I am that too. I am that too, just looking differently.
Yeah.
So I think it's a two-step process. In my experience, it has been.
hmm You know what? And that's like, because when I was 18, I listened to a lot of Eckhart Tolle. And Eckhart Tolle says a lot like you are the choiceless awareness behind the thoughts, and the thoughts are clouds and you're the sky behind the clouds. And I found that kind of insightful, but it wasn't life-changing until I saw that like you say, like that formless energy, which I guess we would call thought, is like I'm doing it. I'm the one that's molding it into what it is. And so it's like it's almost as if I like to think that um it's as if we lived life playing a piano. And like sometimes we play a sad song and sometimes we play a happy song. And that's just like kind of creating our moment to moment experience. It's like, what song are you playing with your thinking? And understanding, okay, yes, it's true. You are that space where those thoughts arise and where that experience is coming from. But also, you're not powerless in the face of that. It's like, if you're having a horrible experience, it's like that experience isn't happening to you, it's happening from you.
Yeah, yeah. I think one thing important for us to notice here is that we are the creators of our experiences. And at one level, it seems now when it seems obvious to you, it seems obvious to you. So I don't know if it's the case with everybody, but uh, when I saw it, it was like the most obvious thing in the world. I just couldn't get why I didn't see it all the way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And yeah, I am the creator of all of these experiences. I mean, it's not different from this system that I think I am. Right? Even if I haven't realized my true identity as consciousness, the unchanging awareness, or like you said, the sky behind the clouds, even if that realization hadn't happened, it was pretty evident that whatever I was thinking and feeling was within this mind body system that I thought was me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just plain stupid to think that it was outside of my purview, my control, at
Mm-hmm.
the mercy of surroundings. It just didn't feel right,
Yeah.
even much before.
Yeah. It's like all experience is happening in the mind.
Yeah.
It's like to even have an experience, there has to be a mind to have it. And so like the mind is like this common denominator that has to, like, everything that happens in consciousness, and everything that happens through thought. Like without thought, there's no details to the experience. And so it's like what else could make you feel a certain way but what you are doing with thought? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I mean, like I told you, I was from the NLP background for a long time. So that made a great deal of sense to me that I was making it up from thought.
Hmm.
That was clear, but I just didn't understand that there was a common ground that was before and beyond thought. So it was like, okay, if I'm making it all up, then there's nothing.
Hmm.
Like, nothing is real. The realization was, oh, when I'm saying nothing is real, I've got it in the wrong direction. That nothing is actually what appears as everything. So the nothing that I was afraid of was actually me, who was everything else too.
Yeah. Okay. Let's let's slow down for a second.
Yeah,
um, when you say so like my impression of kind of what you're saying is okay. Um, okay, like for example, different people can go to different movies, or sorry, different people can go to the same movie and see a different movie, and to that person, that the movie that they see looks like the movie. So it's not like nobody goes around thinking that they're seeing their opinions outside. They think they're seeing what's really there.
yeah,
And so it takes like a great deal of awareness to see that what we think is outside us, what we think is happening to us, is really just happening through thought. And so this brings us to this sort of place where it's like what I understand from what you're saying is okay, it's inherently meaningless. There's no meaning to it. And and yeah, that's a bit nihilistic, isn't it? It's like what's the point of being alive? But even before that, in that space, oh, you know what? Like, okay, I feel that the moment I when I see that I am that space of that space that's encompassing my experience, let's say, that nothingness, from which within there's an appearance of an experience of a body of a, it's almost like a dream, I guess, in a
yeah,
sense. It's almost like we're dreaming using thought. And when I see that I'm that space, I personally experience this feeling of, it's kind of like a silence, but it's like peaceful. It's like a peaceful tranquility of like of coming back. It's like coming back to sort of a home.
yeah, yeah. You actually talked about it pretty well, and there's another dimension to that I want to point out, because I totally agree with what you say. On additional to that, I saw at some point down the line that that home that I'm coming back to, I already am all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It was because I distanced myself as something separate from my thoughts and feelings that I felt I had to go home into that peace and tranquility. It's like it's a paradigm shift. Let me use an example. Probably that will be helpful. Right now, we're using words. Right, we're using words, and if we stop speaking, there's silence. Now, the act of stopping voice and being in silence seems like going home. But if you flip it on its head, it's the silence itself appearing as words too. So in other words, it's take the example of a wave and an ocean, right? When the wave resides, it goes home into the ocean, but actually it's the ocean itself appearing as a wave. The wave is always the ocean. It's just the name and form superimposed on it by thought.
Mm-hmm.
If you remove the concept, which is a name, and the concept, which is a shape, it's the ocean all the time. There is no such thing as a wave.
Mm.
It is through superimposition, through the power of thought, that we create something as separate from us,
Mm-hmm.
and then we play around with it
Yeah, and then
and
we get
forget
really.
that we're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, even in the moments where we feel so far from um, that space, we're actually still in it, and we just don't think we are, basically.
Well, let me even actually make that even more precise, because it's a problem with language. It's the difficulty of talking about it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I would say we we aren't always in that space, no matter what. We are that space thinking that we aren't.
Mm-hmm.
We're always that space, no matter what we think.
Yeah. Hmm. One of the metaphors I like to use to describe this is kind of like when we go to sleep at night, we dream all sorts of dreams, but nothing changes the fact that we're just on the bed. And so it's kind of like that same principle of like beyond this the particulars of this experience is like it's like a veiled, I don't know, the veiled freedom or something like that. There's It's like that deeper part of ourselves, that truer part of ourselves, the very um, the very fabric and nature of life itself, of existence, is our true identity. And it's like through its natural expression that there is this experience of, being someone who's separate from it all.
Yeah, totally. Right? We always now this is part of the problem with language, I would say, because the way we use our words kind of shapes the concepts in our minds about how things work, how life works, right? We always say something exists as if that thing is different from existence. No, existence is existing. Right? So, for example, this phone does not exist. Existence takes the form of this phone.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This cup does not exist. Existence itself takes the form of this cup. So they're not different. It's just that we're using different words, different kinds of thoughts, and complicating the whole thing.
Okay, let's, because this is all very abstract.
Yeah.
How would you say this applies? I mean, I'm just thinking of someone. It's like, all right, I get it. I am I am the whole experience experiencing itself, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Um, but how is that practical? How does that help us in our day-to-day lives with the personal struggles that we go with as humans? Like, I mean, as opposed to it just being like, oh, let's talk philosophy for 5 minutes and then get back to, the our regular life, which is, maybe not so awesome.
Great question, Peter. Actually, love that question. And this is what most people think about it, right? This is some abstract philosophy. But yeah, you're right. This information is not going to help anybody. The realization is going to. What we talked about is words. They don't mean anything. Words are just made up stuff to communicate. But the words point towards some underlying reality. When you see that for yourself, it makes a world of a difference. That isn't philosophy. Philosophy is just a tool to get there, to look in that direction.
Hmm.
So I'd say talking about this is not helpful, but looking at what is it that these guys are talking about, looking in that direction is helpful. Because when you see something for yourself, you change. Not when you hear something, but when you see something. And because I'm a coach, I often tell my clients this. Uh, Whatever I speak to you doesn't matter. I don't care what I speak. What matters is what did you hear in that?
Mm-hmm.
Because that changes people. And there was a point in our conversation when I was talking about no matter what you think, you're always that space where you felt silent too for a moment. You heard something, which is not intellectual, not some philosophy, but some truth behind our experience. When you see the truth, it changes you, fundamentally changes you. And it's effortless because you don't need to do anything for it. It
Mm-hmm.
happens all by itself. And the goal is not to have an intellectual discussion with people around, yeah, this is thought and this is existence, and yeah, all of that is good. Abstract ideas, they're good, but they're just an intellectual exercise. The goal is to see something beyond what we are already seeing. I often write quotes, and there was one particular quote that I've written. I think that's very relevant to what we're talking about. I'm just going to pull that up.
Sure.
uh, Here it is. Yeah, so the transformation is as simple and instantaneous as opening your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
But for that, you first need to know that you have eyes. You need to know that they're closed. You need to know that there's a way to open them, and that there is a reality beyond what you're seeing right now, and a willingness to do all of this. But once these prerequisites are met, it's actually as simple as that. Because the sun is already in the sky. You just need to goddamn open your eyes and see the light.
Mm-hmm.
But for that, you need to understand that there's an equipment for you to see light, that there is something that you can do to open your eyelids. That's all that's needed. Now, we can go on and on about the nature of eyelids and how we can open them and how there's some abstract thing when you open the eyes. But that's not helpful. The actual act of opening the eyes is helpful. So I'd urge to look beyond what we're talking, look beyond all of these, okay, cool to hear stuff, and look at, okay, these guys are talking about some abstract stuff for so long. There must be something deeper than what they're talking about, that they're talking about. So the example I often use is the word silence, right? The word silence is actually the exact opposite of silence, but it points to silence. Right? If we're listening to the word silence and we say, yeah, silence, 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 we're very far from silence.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So don't get stuck here in the definitions and the concepts. Because there's something which is opposite to what you're hearing right now, which this is trying to point to. That isn't abstract or philosophical or intellectual. That's very experiential. That's direct perception.
Mm-hmm.
I would say just look in that direction without getting lost in ideas and concepts.
It's difficult for to because the thinking that naturally arises from listening to that, like, not, what is it? There's like the capital L listening and then the lowercase L listening. There's like the lowercase L listening, which is like, let me wrestle with those ideas and try to figure out what you're saying. And then there's the capital L listening, where it's like, I'm going to that space that you're talking about, and I'm exploring that. And I feel like in the lowercase listening experience, there's the only thing that can be found is confusion. It's literally impossible for our own intellect to grasp the true nature of who we really are.
You're right. It's difficult for the intellect to grasp. And I would, now, because I get to work with a lot of people as a coach, there are two distinct approaches that I tend to take with people. There are some people who have a high functioning intellect. I happen to be one of those people. So I use my intellect to get through to things. But there are other people who don't use their intellect in such a fashion. There's a different way you could go. You don't need to fire up your intellect and try and understand it. You can as well shut it down, and it leads you to the same result.
Mm.
Because at the last step where the identity shift happened for me, I realized that reason negates itself. Reason, which is the faculty of reasoning, the intellect's powerhouse, reason negates itself, intellect kills itself. And that's when the truth gets revealed.
Mm-hmm.
But till that step, you need the intellect if that's the path you're taking. Or you could just give it all up right now, do nothing, just be in silence and observe and listen to whatever the person is saying, and you'll get it immediately, instantaneously. So
Mm-hmm.
it depends on inclination, really.
So, okay, I guess I have two thoughts. The first one is, like, my I feel like the whole point of talking about all this stuff intellectually is to come to the point where we realize you can never understand it intellectually. And then it's like it's almost like it's almost like talking about it intellectually so the intellect can sort of destroy itself. And then in that destruction, it's like there's kind of a let's say a remembering of like, oh, I'm not that. But what would you say is like, so, okay, let's just say right now in this moment, someone is capital L listening, deeply in silence and ready to receive a life changing insight. What would you say?
I would just tell them the truth. I wouldn't even talk about thought and consciousness and all of these things. I'll because all of them are a gateway to the final realization of who you are and what's really happening. Right? I would tell them, oh, look, these are the things that are happening. I'd have them check in, because when somebody's capital L listening for insight,
Mm.
not for intellectual understanding, they're willing to see something that I'm showing them. So I'll just show them, hey, look, check in with your own experience. Don't believe me. Don't follow my words. And I'll describe their experience of life in a way that they've never heard before.
So can you describe that?
Yeah,
Like,
sure. Yeah.
go
So,
for
so
it.
look, Peter, like in all these years, eh, there's so many things that you experienced. Your personality, your the kind of person you were, the kind of experiences you've had, they were all changing, right? So
Hmm.
you could play along with me, and you could see if it works for you. Right?
Hmm.
Your body is obviously a mass of changes. It wasn't the same a year ago. It won't be the same a year down the line. You could easily work it out. Could easily gain more weight. You definitely didn't look the same when you were a kid. So obviously that part of you is changing.
Hmm.
Yet you say, this is me, regardless of the changes. Right? There's another part of you, the mental plane, right, where you're thinking, where your inner world resides, where your personality comes up, where you have memory and imagination. Right? Your thoughts and your feelings are constantly changing every single minute. You're not thinking the exact thought you're thinking right now, even 2 minutes ago.
Hmm.
You're probably not feeling the same emotion that you felt an hour ago. They're in a constant state of flux. They're completely changing all the time, all the years of your life. Yet you say it's you who's experiencing all of this. You say it's your life. Right?
Hmm.
Now, if everything is changing, and usually at this point the client goes, "Oh, then what the hell is happening? Everything is changing," and it kind of freaks people out a little bit. But there's something deeper to see. There's one aspect of you that hasn't changed. It's the fact that you were aware of all these changes. In the 10-year-old Peter body, in the 20-year-old Peter body, you were still aware. You knew that body. Whatever the 10-year-old Peter's thoughts and feelings were, in real time, you knew what they were. Right now, you know what they are. The fact that you are constantly aware of whatever it is that you're experiencing is an unchanging fact about you,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of whatever else is changing. And if you say that is also me and this is also me, the only real basis for your identity has to be that. Because that's the only thing that's unchanging about you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The fact that you are conscious, you are a conscious being. And this is regardless of what you happen to think, regardless of what you happen to feel. And at this point, usually people come up with objections because they've heard something radical and their brain starts kicking in, the intellect starts kicking in.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, but. And I slow them out and I point out, whatever you said right now, aren't you aware of that too? Isn't that a thought in your awareness? Right? You can call it a positive thought or a negative thought. You could call it, I don't know, there's this fancy terminology is coming up, right? The inner saboteurs or whatever the name you want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
whatever archetype or personality that you want to call it, right? Isn't that showing up in your awareness right now? So I think the difference, the thing that makes the difference is pointing out that you're not seeing something, you're not aware of something, it's in your awareness. It's a paradigm shift, basically. Saying that, hey, whatever I'm thinking right now, the fact that I'm aware of what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling right now shows me that there's this constant field of awareness in which thoughts and feelings come.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Once the person has that shift in perspective, that's all that's needed. They usually fall silent and they we I a lot of times I've spent like 90 minutes conversation. The last 30 minutes we just sat in silence
Yeah.
because they couldn't think anything because they realized, oh, any thinking is just thinking,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't matter.
Yeah. I feel ya. Let me ask you this. Um, so when this paradigm shift happens in someone, let's say, and the I guess you could describe it as like the attachment to the content, the identification with the content of what's happening, kind of falls away, I suppose you could say.
Yeah, totally. You could say that the attachment with the content falls away, and you realize the context instead.
Mm-hmm. So, like, I can speak for my own experience of having seen that, and like the implications that it's had on my life, on in almost like a practical level. Um, just kind of, like whenever. Well, I mean, I could speak, but like, I'm curious, like, what are the implications of this? How does it affect people to have this realization?
That's a very huge area in itself, right? It changes everything. When I say everything, everything that you could possibly think of, right? It's life changing. But when I say life changing, you pick anything that you can possibly pick. It's part of your life, right? Leadership in organizations, in life, relationships, your health, your well-being, your mental health.
Okay,
Uh,
wait, pause there. Let's just pick one. Let's pick like relationships. So
sure.
how does this paradigm shift affect our experience of relationships?
I'm smiling because it's something very dear to me too. Uh, it had a huge difference for me in terms of relationships. At a superficial level, and it's not superficial by any means, but just using that word to point out there's something deeper too. At the first level, you realize that you're just innocently misusing your thinking. Right? You happen to feel something, you happen to think something, and you take it seriously. You get attached to the content. You don't realize it's thinking. And then you act in accordance to what you get attached to. Right? And you inflict pain on other people innocently. When you see that, you start understanding other people in your life better. You start seeing that this is happening with every human being on this planet, actually. I can't blame them for it. Right? So you stop blaming people. First thing, if somebody's hurting you, you stop blaming them. Because now you have the capacity to not get hurt, no matter what the other person is doing. At a mental level, of course, not physical abuse. But conflict in relationships is resolved instantaneously when you see it, because you see that everybody is going through the same boat, basically. Okay? And nobody's told anybody how this thing works. It's like you've been given a fighter jet, and nobody told you how to fly it.
Yeah.
Okay? And everybody's shooting at everybody else, but somebody realizes, oh hey, wait, it's just the fact that nobody told them. That's why it's happening. So the blame stops, the projection stops. At a deeper level, when that happens, the next step opens up, and that is the realization that these other people, they're no different from you. It's the same you, the consciousness shining in them too, looking at their experience too. Right? And so not only now is there a lack of judgment, there is now an abundance of compassion and love. And when I say love, not in the romantic sense, but agape love, like unconditional kind of love. Right? Because it's not love for another person, it's not love towards something. It's love as an expression of who you are. You're loving just because you're so overfilled with love. That's it. And that fundamentally changes the dynamics of any relationship, be it a professional or a personal one, because you start showing up differently. Your state of mind, your state of being is different now because you've seen that. And just to summarize, two important things happened there. Number one is you're not affected by what other people are saying or doing. You have your consistent peace of mind and the feeling of well-being and love and joy and all of that. Number two, you understand everybody in the world perfectly well. No matter what they're doing, no matter how insane they might initially seem to be, at some level you understand them completely without even actually talking to them, because you know their inner workings are just the same as yours. And from that, there's a loving compassion.
Yeah, beautiful.
And that's what we need in all relationships, right? That's what everybody's looking for in relationships.
Yeah, it's as if every human being is this pure, whole, complete and perfect light of consciousness, and it just shines on what we think, and then we get lost in what we think, believing that it's telling us about the world and about our situation. And I guess the difference is, yeah, I mean, I can speak from my experience in my relationship. Actually, I just wrote a Facebook post yesterday about this, about how before, I always struggle with insecurity and jealousy and all this stuff. It was just but it seemed normal to me. It seemed like something that it's just, had all this reasoning for it, that it's like a biological possession thing from the caveman times. It's like part of our genetics to be possessive and jealous and all that stuff. But I didn't know at the time that the feelings I were having were literally just a result of the light of consciousness shining on the thinking I was having at that moment. Because it looked so real to me and it felt so real to me, I would get lost and I would go, hours, days, months even, just being insecure. And just seeing the simplicity that I am not what I think, but that which is forming thought, you could say. Just the simplicity of that. It was I no longer, whenever, and I do sometimes, insecure thoughts come up for me. And I just find it funny. Okay, not always. Sometimes I get lost in them. That still happens on occasion. but very rarely. Most of the time, it's like this thinking arises, insecure thinking, and there's a light of consciousness shines on it, and I just feel like, oh, I don't want that, and then I just let it dissolve, and then there's this like it's like returning, returning to that peace of mind that that's really only ever one thought away.
Yeah, that's true. It's only ever one thought away. And I want to pick on something that you mentioned in there when you said the light of consciousness shines on insecure thinking, and then you're like affected by that.
Mm-hmm.
What I've seen as as my grounding grew deeper and deeper, and as my shift in identity solidified more profoundly, is that insecure thinking, I don't need to be afraid of it at any moment, even if it's my experience, because it's nothing other than me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more like the when you're saying consciousness and thought, we're talking about it as two separate things for the sake of understanding. That's an analytical model for understanding
Mm-hmm.
how this stuff works.
Yeah.
Right? There's light and there's thought, but really they're one and the same. It's like the difference between, hey, there's an iceberg floating in water. It's actually the water itself appearing as an iceberg floating in water. The water doesn't need to be afraid of an iceberg
Mm-hmm.
because it's nothing different from the water itself.
Yeah.
Its
Yeah.
substance is water. It just looks different.
Yeah.
It was formless earlier. It isn't formed now. That's all.
Yeah. It's kind of like, and that's an interesting thing. Actually, it reminds me of more of a health aspect, but um, like whenever you believe that there's some sort of distance between you and your experience, it's like, oh, I'm the experiencer and the experience is over here, kind of thing. It's like there actually is no distance. It's like you literally are experience, I guess, or something like that, right?
Right. The experience, the experiencer, the experienced are not different. They're one.
Yeah. And that's like, I mean, this reminds me of a few weeks ago. I had some really bad nausea, and I was throwing up and stuff. And for my whole life, I've always been very, very, very averse to the feeling of nausea. Like I just hated it. I hated it with a passion. And it was like, when something is happening, and you're just like, how many seconds until this is done? I can't stand it anymore. Even, I mean, like, it makes me think about, I used to go to work and stuff, and I just like counting down the minutes until the end of the day where I can go home, kind of thing. It was like that experience of like being so uncomfortable inside the situation. And but I was really curious, and I really wanted to explore um like what was happening from that sort of uh from the perspective of consciousness, or like, like what's going on in the deeper world that's appearing as this. And I noticed that how I felt, let's say, like what seemed to be a feeling in my stomach, let's say, the feeling of nausea, right? It's like I was kind of pushing it away.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of like, as you would say, like superimposing, like, this is nausea, this is bad, I hate it, it's really uncomfortable. And so I would push that away, and then I would try to analyze it. Okay, what do I do? I should do some breathing. I should do, all this stuff, all this, like, how, because it's so uncomfortable, right? It's like, but when I saw that it was that my own superimposition of thought that I was putting on top of, like, you could call it maybe like the raw sensation. Like when I saw that, okay, you know what? It's like the idea of like a plastic glove. I feel like that's kind of how we treat a lot of our emotional experiences. It's
Yeah.
like, what's that thing over there? How do I get rid of it? Don't touch me, kind of thing. It's like, I don't want to, but it's
Yeah.
you. And And when that veil, when I saw that I was superimposing that, when I just kind of it kind of fell away, basically. The veil kind of fell away, and I saw that I am that raw sensation. And in that experience, it kind of, it's very difficult to describe, but it kind of, like I didn't merge with it, but I saw that I was it all along. And I saw that I didn't have to be afraid of it. That it's just like, oh, it's me, it's life, you know? And then there was this experience of total harmony, of total peace. And like, you could look at me from the outside and, I'm like on the couch, right? I'm like, can't move. I'm like, "Ugh." But inwardly, I was just in total harmony with this movement of energy and offering no resistance, no pushing away, just kind of this, I guess you could call it a state of pure allowing. But it was actually very, really beautiful. It was a beautiful experience and very peaceful. And I didn't want it to end. But like, I knew that, like, that I didn't want to end had nothing to do with the nausea itself. It just had to do with me fully uh, uh, feeling this without superimposing thought on it. Like that uh, what do you call it? Like this, like the beauty is the like an attribute to the eternalness of this present moment, which we then superimpose thought onto.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I know, like that last part. I'm like, I'm
No, I
confusing
get it.
myself even.
But I get what you're saying. I get why this is difficult to put words to too. And there was one part where you said, no, I was in a state of allowing. And that's, for a lot of people, it's easy to see that struggle is a result of offering resistance to the flow of life.
Mm.
If you cease offering resistance, there is no struggle. But just that in itself freaks people out. Oh, but then life goes in unplanned ways, right? If I do not offer resistance, if I do not shape it up the way I want it to be, right? So first the insight happened for you, so it was very easy for you to say, I'm not going to offer resistance.
Oh yeah.
So I think we're talking about what you just talked about, the entire experience is a byproduct of insight. It isn't the real thing. Because you saw something fundamentally more true, it just showed up as a profound sense of peace in the midst of nausea.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a really good point to make because it's it would be so easy to try to take that experience that I'm describing and turn it into, okay, how do I apply this when I feel nauseous? How do I apply it when I feel uncomfortable? And it requires that insight first into the deeper nature of who we are. Because otherwise, the words allowing and resistance aren't really helpful. They kind of, you know, yeah, so like we do require seeing into the deeper nature of where our experience is coming from in order for that sort of everything I described in my nausea experience to happen. Like it's not an application, it's like a natural implication of seeing deeper into who we really are.
That's perfect, right? That's because we're all conditioned to try and do something first, right? We're not conditioned to slow down and look. So often people are like, so what do I do now?
Hmm.
They're looking for some method, right? Something to do. And I think that's a pitfall because you don't need to do anything. All of these doing things are reversed engineer methods. It's like taking your specific example and trying to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's not helpful at all, right? The thing that's helpful is to not do anything really, and instead look at what's happening, try and understand what's happening, what's really happening.
Mm-hmm.
And that basically all psychology, all coaching models and methodologies is reverse engineered approaches taken from natural experiences for people who've had insight.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember one of my favorite people, Jiddu Krishnamurti.
Oh yeah,
He said, seeing. No, he said understanding is its own action, which is like completely. If you really like get what he's saying, I suppose
yeah.
it's like it's almost like you're surrendering to this. Oh, you know what? I like to use this term like conditioned mind and unconditioned mind.
Unconditioned mind. Yeah,
So it's like in the conditioned mind, it's like, oh, what do I do? How do I like? How can I wrestle that image to make it go away, kind of thing. And it's like, oh, should I do this? Should I move that way? Should I think like that? Should I think like this? Should I do a mantra? Should I go to the doctor? And it's like there's all these things that are all doing, and yet in the dissolving of the conditioned mind, there's almost this awakening or a movement of unconditioned wisdom, and that movement is like that's what does the doing. It's like it's not you that fixes things. It's this unconditioned wisdom that just um I don't know what the word is, animates, maybe moves through
yeah.
you, something
Life
like
force.
that.
You could call it life force, the
Yeah.
animated force, spirit, whatever you want to call it, right?
Mm.
And I would actually say when you said it's not you who does it, it's that which does it. I would actually say that is you. What
Yeah.
you think you are isn't you. It's a
Absolutely.
figment
Yeah.
of your imagination.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's like the conditioned self who you think you are that you actually aren't
Yeah.
dissolves into nothing. And then the true self, which is the unconditioned movement of, life, arises, and it's like, oh, this is me. This is who I've been
Yeah.
all along. Like, what was I doing playing in that little thing or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like that's the realization. That's the thing to have, right?
Hmm.
Once you have that insight, I think everything else that we've talked about occurs naturally without any effort from our end. But that's the insight that, oh, this isn't me. What the hell have I been doing all this time?
Hmm.
That's me.
Yeah.
I think that's just the one thing. If there's one lever that has to be pulled, it's just that one.
Hmm. Great. Fantastic. What time are we at? Okay, cool. I feel pretty happy about our conversation, and I think this is probably a good time to bring it to a close. Um, is there? Let's see. So I'm just going through my checklist of what to do when I'm closing a podcast. So do you have like a website or something where if anyone wants to get in touch with you personally, they can reach you?
Yeah, yeah, I do have a website. It's my name, rishirongala.com, RISHIRONGALA.
Right. Okay, there you go. So if you want to get in touch with Rishi, go to his website. And also, you are like what time do you coach on Heartfelt Presence?
I coach on Fridays. I live in India, so it's Indian time, 12:30 p.m.
Okay, there you go. So if you want to get in touch with Rishi, you know how to do it. um, I swear there's something else that I'm gonna forget. I never know how to close these podcasts. It's always on the spot. Like, what do I do? But yeah, I guess is there anything that you want to add?
Well, I would ask you this, and I'm just flipping the question back to you. Is there anything that you really wanted to ask at some point and you did not?
Mm, not me personally, but maybe someone listening.
Ah,
So we just need to channel them, right?
no, I think we're good. We've gone far deeper than I thought we would go, and thanks for stopping me from being too abstract. I think that's really helpful for the listeners' sake.
Yeah, yeah. We got to make it real, Like, yeah. But I think this was really good, though. I think it was a great podcast. And yeah, thanks for coming on. Um, and for those who are maybe missed the beginning, Rishi's a volunteer on Heartfelt Presence, which is a 24/7 Zoom room that anyone can jump in at any time and talk to someone and maybe experience some insights, maybe find peace. Who knows? But we're here for you. So, um, yeah, it's heartfeltpresence.org. So yeah, thanks for coming on. Maybe we'll have you on in a year or something when we go through the whole cycle of all the coaches. All
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Thanks a lot.
right, take care.